Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. At least 26 people have been killed and 93 others wounded in Israeli airstrikes that targeted a mosque and a school sheltering displaced individuals in the Gaza Strip early this morning. The Israeli military claimed it carried out precise strikes on Hamas terrorists who were operating within command and control centers located in Ibn Rushd schools and the Shuhada Al-aqsa Mosque in Deir Al-balah. Now, explosions rocked Beirut's southern suburbs as well. Meanwhile, the strong explosions began near midnight and continued into October 6th after Israel's military urged residents to evacuate areas in Deir. The Israeli military had earlier called for residents to evacuate Hezbollah strongholds in the southern suburbs before launching the strikes, marking a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed militant group. With tensions escalating, the world now seems to be divided, favoring one side or the other. There seems to be a proxy war with the US indefinitely giving its support to Israel and Russia and China pledging their support to Iran. Amidst all of this, it's important for us to understand the complexities of the war through a geopolitical perspective. Joining us at this point is Hamid Musavi, fellow University of Tehran. We also have Lev Aran, senior Israeli journalist, joining us live. Peter Baum, foreign editor, Weekly Blitz, is also live with us on the broadcast. Burzin Wagmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS University of London, is also joining us live. Let me get started with you first, Burzin Wagmar. What do you make of this, fresh escalation in the conflict in the Middle East?
Well, there's nothing fresh about it. It is a consistent, limited, measured operation which the IDF has embarked upon. And we have to realize this in light of also President Macron's remarks that 41 years ago, in October 83, 58 French Marines were killed, to say nothing of 241 US Marines who were part of the multinational peacekeeping force. And also, it is deplorable that President Macron has decided to suspend arms shipments to Israel when it is fighting on 7 fronts. This is nothing to say also of the fact that he is pandering to French politics after a disastrous snap summer election and Michel Barnier forming a cabinet just about last week. And Monsieur Macron has to play to the hard left elements within French society whose protests for Palestine and Lebanon are anything but politicized, but deeply driven by anti-Semitism. If you take Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the man who is part of the hard left movement and the La France Insoumise party, who is spearheading and leading students, egging French university students to hold Hezbollah flags. Repeat, not Palestine self-determination flags, but Hezbollah flags on campus, and to defy university authorities, given that Hezbollah is globally, at least in the West, acknowledged as a terrorist outfit. And this is a man who has members of parliament in the French National Assembly. This is a man who actually is on record to say that if Jesus was supposedly put on a cross, it has to be by his own people, which smacks of nothing but rabid anti-Semitism deicide, and that needs to be put into context as we come up to the first anniversary of the October 7th atrocity, which saw the maximum worst killing of Jews since the Holocaust. So Monsieur Macron is simply pandering to domestic politics here, and it is absolutely deplorable that he cannot bring himself to see also this. And one last point, Paris takes a paternalistic position on Lebanon now that the war is in Lebanon, given that it ran the show until 1943, after 23 years of mandate rule. And the French have historically felt they have a say in Lebanese matters. And it is true to a certain extent with the French Maronite Catholic population and the rest of it. But, and there is also the French domestic component of Maronites, Franco-Lebanese nationals. But then there are also Franco-Israeli nationals, some of whose survivors Monsieur Macron is intending to meet, I believe, this week, after the Nova massacre of last October.
Okay, let me also quickly bring in Hamid Musavi in at this point. Hamid Musavi, what do you make of this, escalation in the conflict? We're seeing now, of course, 2 centers of conflict very clearly in Gaza, as the strikes, of course, continue there, which Israel calls precision strikes on Hamas, and also now the southern suburbs of Beirut, which are seeing, further strikes launched by Israel over the last 24 hours as well.
Well, I mean, the other guest is talking about limited strikes and precision strikes, etc. But what we have in Gaza is actually a genocide. 40,000 civilians killed, and this includes 20,000 children. And regardless of what you say and the ideology you have, killing 20,000 children cannot be whitewashed. Now they're doing the same now with Lebanon, dropping 2,000-pound bombs in civilian neighborhoods. They're saying we want to assassinate such and such, but in effect, they're killing many civilians, up to 2,000 in the past few weeks. Now, when the other guest talks about October 7th, and every life is valuable, but this shouldn't only be the case with the Israelis. We keep hearing from Western leaders and from Israeli leaders that Israel has the right to defend itself. What about the Lebanese? Do the Lebanese have the right to defend themselves? Do the Iranians have the right to defend themselves? And most important of all, do the Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? They've been under occupation for decades, and all of the mess we are in right now is because of that occupation. And unfortunately, we are leading down a road of escalation that might actually lead to war. So it is very unfortunate, but this is the reality of the Middle East right now.
Right. And now, as far as, of course, Hamid Musavi, the direction this conflict has taken, where do you see it headed in the next few weeks now?
I think it will depend a lot on how significant the Israeli attack on Iran will be. Most analysts believe that there will be an attack, but we don't know the scale of that. If it's a large-scale attack, then I think Iran will respond, and then perhaps the Israelis will respond, and this might spiral out of control. I don't think that's something that the Iranians want. I don't think that's something that the Biden administration wants, with 1 month going to the presidential elections. But for now, we don't know what's going to happen, and it's quite worrying, actually.
Yes, what's the perspective in Tehran and in Iran? What do you make of this warning, of course, from the Israeli Prime Minister that they are right now measuring what their assault will be, when it will take place, and what scale it will be?
Well, life in Tehran is going on as usual. I mean, universities, schools, everything's are open. Nevertheless, last night there was a lot of rumors in the media that the attack might actually take place last night, and it didn't. So at this stage, I think we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Also now, Hamid Musavi, as far as, of course, the escalation is concerned, given the fact that now many are taking sides as well, what do you make of the geopolitics? Because there are those who are backing Iran and backing, of course, the defense of Lebanon and Hezbollah of those in Gaza, and there are those, of course, who are siding very clearly with Israel in this conflict as well, and their right to defend themselves.
Well, actually, in the United States, the Morning Consult did a very large-scale poll of 43 countries, and it came to the conclusion that in 42 out of the 43 countries, public perspective of Israel had gone negative. So 1 year on, the Gaza war has not actually reached its military objectives. The only thing it's done is that it's killed a lot of civilians. So I do agree with you that in terms of politicians, there are disagreements of which side they choose. But if you look at polls of people in different countries, including in the West, mind you, in the United Kingdom, as well as even in the United States, public opinion is shifting against Israel. And I think this is because of the very large-scale civilian casualties, including the women and children that are dying.
Do you believe a de-escalation is possible anytime in the near future? And how is that going to happen?
I do think it's possible, but I think it will very much depend on the Americans. Right now, by the Biden administration, because of the presidential elections being so near, I don't think Netanyahu is really listening to him. But at the same time, the Americans are perhaps the only power in the world that do have the power to stop the Israelis. So it will really much depend on who's going to be the next president. If Trump comes into power, then everything is going to get worse. We're going to actually have more instability in the region. If perhaps Harris comes into power, then maybe, and this is a big maybe, maybe he will be able to push the Israelis towards a ceasefire in Gaza. And once there's a ceasefire in Gaza, I think the whole situation with Iran, with Lebanon, all of that will de-escalate. But until we don't have a ceasefire, then everything is on a path towards war. And this is going to lead to increased oil prices, and it's going to be bad for the global economy as well. So like I said, it's quite distressing.
What role do you believe India can play in all of this?
Sorry, can you repeat
What
the question,
role do you
please?
believe India can play in all of this?
Well, India is actually it's in a very special place in the sense that it's one of the very few countries in the world that has relatively good relations with both Iran and with Israel. So perhaps it can act as a mediator, but I don't think that can happen right now. So right now we're seeing a military escalation between the two sides, but once the dust settles and there's a de-escalation of the military situation, perhaps India can play a role, both in terms of Iran-US relations as well as Iran-Israel relations. And I think Iran-US relations is perhaps even more important than the second one, because if Iran and the United States are able to reach a deal, then I think that will also affect the military confrontation between Iran and Israel.
Yes. Now, the escalation from Iran's side that we saw a few days back, vis-a-vis, of course, the multiple missiles that were fired on Israel, and some of them actually, of course, got through their weapon shield as well. Was that something that was expected, or did that take you and other analysts by surprise?
I mean, the timing, most people didn't expect the timing, but the fact that Iran responded, I think most analysts expected that. We have to remember that when Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, was assassinated in Tehran, and this happened on the inauguration day of the new president, so it was very significant. Everybody expected Iran to respond. Now, Iran didn't respond and showed a lot of restraint, and this was in order to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. But and there was a lot of promises by Western leaders that if Iran does not respond, then we're going to see a ceasefire in Gaza. And Iran did not respond. What was the result of that? The result was that the Israelis assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, next. So the understanding in Tehran came to the conclusion that regardless of whether Iran is responding or not responding, the Israelis are escalating no matter what. So we might as well respond, because that's going to affect the deterrence of the country. So I think everybody expected Iran to respond after Nasrallah's assassination, but I think the timing was perhaps surprising.
All right, Hamid Musavi, we leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on this story. Let me go across to Lev Aran now, who's also live with us. Lev Aran, a fresh escalation in the conflict. Israel, of course, targeting more sites in Gaza. Meanwhile, also, of course, we do believe violence in southern suburbs of Lebanon has also been reported, Beirut rather, in particular. What do you make of this escalation?
I think it is quite simple. Israel tries to kick out all the Iranian proxies from the West Bank, from Gaza, and from the Lebanese border with Israel. And as far as Israel is concerned, for the Iranians, the Arab blood is cheap. That's why Arabs in Yemen, in Iraq, in West Bank, in Gaza, in Lebanon, they are shedding their blood, while the Iranians, they are living their normal life in Tehran. We heard what Hamid just said. Yes, they have a normal life, while the Arabs have nightmarish life, and this nightmarish life is because the Iranians are fanning the flames everywhere. Actually, also in Kashmir, they're fanning the flames all the time.
Exactly.
So in a way, Israel's goal was to reclaim 1701. And now that Israel is even more successful than Israel expected, and Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas are quite hysteric because they don't know whom to trust, because even the human intelligence of Israel proved itself to be so effective. So right now what happens is that Israel simply wants to kick out Hezbollah from the border and make it less effective force in Lebanon.
Yes, Peter Baum, let me quickly get you in here as well. Peter, which way is this conflict now headed? What do you make of this escalation? And what is your analysis of which direction now this conflict is headed in?
Yes, good evening, and thank you for having me on again. Again, all the guests have spoken with a lot of common sense here. I think our friend in Tehran is, as expected, singing from the hymn sheet that the totalitarian theocrats in Tehran would expect. He's quite wrong on one thing about Israel not achieving its military objectives. This is a long game for Israel, and it certainly is achieving its military objectives, which would be to dilute, if not decapitate, the proxies of Iran. Now, we've seen it's taken a year for them to get to the stage where Hamas is no longer anywhere near the military threat Hamas was on October the 7th of last year. Israel, it will take years for Hamas to recover from the military losses that it's suffered. By hitting Hezbollah, as it has been hitting Hezbollah, Israel obviously is nowhere near achieving the same objective as it has achieved with Hamas, but has certainly made some huge indentations into the Hezbollah hierarchy, the infrastructure, and of course the people of Beirut, who have been facilitating via the Lebanese government Hezbollah's presence. This is a third-party Iranian proxy acting as a militia within the sovereign country of Lebanon. And when Hezbollah fired those rockets into Israel, it was clear that Israel was going to respond. The world at large has been rather taken aback by the depth of Israel's response, because in usual times, when Israel does suffer atrocities, there's a kind of tit for tat. It goes on for 2 weeks, a little political solution arises, but nothing is ever achieved. October the 7th was a game changer. The red line was changed by Hamas, and now Israel, her government and her people expect whichever, not just the Netanyahu government, they would expect it of any government, to achieve a military objective by decimating as far as is possible the Iranian proxies. May I say, the Houthis, and I think I said this last time, are suffering greatly from natural disasters. The floods in Yemen are having a devastating effect on Yemeni life. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, thousands killed, bridges washed away, there is no livestock. So I don't think the Houthis represent the kind of threat pre the floods that they could represent now. So I firmly believe that Israel will continue with its military objectives in defeating Hezbollah. We are all awaiting the attack on Iran. I think it will come. To what depth it will be, I think will depend on how great the Biden administration are going to pressure Israel. We're only 1 month away again from the Trump election, and it could be that Israel plays its hand and isn't as severe in its response to Iran as it would be or could be if Mr. Trump was or became the president. So I think 30 days from now, we'll be in a position to know what American politics is going to be like, and that's going to have a huge impact on the next few months in the Middle East situation. But for the time being, the general view of the, let's say, the impartial analysts is to expect Israel to continue achieving its main objective in decimating or diluting the ability of Hezbollah as it has done Hamas.
And Pratap, your Indian viewers need to know that Iranian terrorism has existed on Indian soil with the attack on the Israeli embassy personnel, not just in 2012, but also on 26 December 2023, last year. That latter explosion that I just referred to occurred not near the embassy precincts, but a few streets away. But Delhi police has now confirmed that it was due to an IRGC operation, and the IRGC in question, when it undertakes such operations abroad, it is through its Al-Quds division. And I'm sure that the Indians have had words with Tehran about it, following the 2012 explosion as well, but also after December 2023. So I think Indians would do well to realize that Iran has India in its sights. What with Khamenei's pronouncements about so-called Indian minorities and their plight, not to mention about the rupee-real trade and the UCO Bank Calcutta scam of $3.2 billion, rupees 20,000 crore, which is under the scanner with the Enforcement Directorate in New Delhi. I felt as an Iranist, coming from Iranian studies, I need to point that out to your Indian viewership.
Yes.
May I just interject with one other thing
Sure,
that I
sure.
think is very important? We hear this a lot from the pro-Palestinian political commentators, always talking about the Iranian pro-Palestinian political commentators, always talking about a genocide happening amongst the Palestinians in Gaza. The Iranians care little for Palestinian life. They have been eminent in helping President Assad Syria in killing something like 600,000 plus Syrians in the last several years. And of those, there are at least 10 or 15,000 Palestinians who are anti the Syrian regime. So please, let's not be fooled by this terminology about concerns and a genocide on the Palestinian people when the Iranians have been preeminent in assisting Assad kill over 600,000 Syrians, including thousands of Palestinians. So let's challenge that whenever it's brought forward to us.
All
And
right,
let's also challenge the fact that Indo-Israeli ties are, Indo-Iranian ties are warm, when they are actually given the fact that Iran, the Islamic Republic, has always blown hot and blown cold, and hedging its relationship with both India and Pakistan
Right.
to maximize outcomes by playing them off against each
Okay,
other.
I'm going to have to take a break. We've run completely out of time. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. Let's quickly